Okay, I counted to 17, but here we go. We'll start from here. Welcome everyone to the launch of a very important book, as always, from Ram Guha. Book is Commonwealth of Cricket. His fourth book, I believe, on cricket. Ram, that's right? It's your fourth book on cricket. And there are some very, very important books in there. Of course, the Corner of a Foreign Field, foremost among them, but Wickets from the East also, some good stories in there. And one of my personal favorites actually was not a book that you wrote, I guess, but you edited, was the anthology, the Picador Book of Cricket, which brought together some excellent writing on cricket from around the world. Ram was in charge of that. So this book was out recently, Commonwealth of Cricket. Ram, I think you'll tell us a little bit about the book and then we can get into a conversation after that.
Absolutely. And thank you, Osman. Thank you, Yaqub. It's wonderful to be here in conversation at the ThinkFest. This is the cover of the book, The Commonwealth of Cricket. And it's the subtitle. I should start with the subtitle. The subtitle is A Lifelong Love Affair with the Most Subtle and Sophisticated Game Known to Humankind. So the first part is factual. Lifelong love affair. I'm now in my early 60s. And my first memories of cricket go back to when I was 4. So 6 decades of watching, playing, writing, debating, discussing, arguing about cricket all over the world, mostly in India, but also, I've traveled to Pakistan and to England and to Australia and to South Africa and watched cricket, talked about cricket. So the subtle and sophisticated is a more kind of contentious issue, and I suppose it's a phrase in Hindi and possibly in Urdu also. मैं चाबी देना चाहता था. I wanted to finger people who love Arsenal Football Club or who are devotees of Roger Federer or who play golf. I wanted to tell them that cricket is the most subtle and sophisticated game in humankind, or known to humankind. So this is it's kind of the memoir traces the arc of my journey, and it's a memoir brought an autobiography, because I was a rather ordinary cricketer. If I was Kapil Dev or Anil Kumble, it would be an autobiography. But this is not so much about cricket I played. There's a little bit about matches I played, but mostly it's about cricket I watched, perceived, debated, discussed. It's a tribute to great cricketers across the board. So from club cricketers in my hometown, Dehradun, which is a small town in the Himalayan foothills, to college cricketers in Delhi, to the great stars of the Karnataka Ranji Trophy team, to West Indian and Australian cricketers, and also Pakistani cricketers, to whom I have devoted a chapter. And then towards the end of the book, it comes to the brief period I spent in the BCCI, where I was absolutely a fish out of water. And then it ends with I didn't want to end on a sour note, so the book ends with a nostalgic evocation of what cricket has meant to this rather old man, who still has a boy inside him when it comes to the most subtle and sophisticated game known to humankind.
Brilliant. Yeah, I can highly recommend it. I would recommend it on the basis that it is, without having even having not read it, I would recommend it on the basis that it's come from Ram, because I think growing up myself, I think one of the most important books I read, it was right up there. One of the first kind of serious books was A Corner of a Foreign Field. Essentially a biography of some of the great players of an era that was very little known about, Palvankar Balu and C.K. Naidu. But also, it works essentially as a social history of Indian cricket, Corner of a Foreign Field. So, I would highly recommend anyone who's on to get that, as well as the Commonwealth of Cricket. Now, Ram, you start off this book. There's a quote from Jack Fingleton at the start of this book. I won't use the whole quote, but he starts off by saying, "The longer I live, I'm pleased to say, the less nationalistic I become." And then, he goes on to talk about how it's almost like an objective appreciation of the game, rather than, to be tied up with one's country or one's team winning or losing. It's an objective appreciation of the game, or whether it's a fine innings or a good bowling spell. Have you come to that kind of appreciation of the game, or have you always been that way? Because you never struck me as one of, as a fanatical fan of Indian cricket, for example.
So when I was a young boy, I was a cricketing nationalist. So in my teens and in my 20s, I was a cricketing nationalist. By my 30s, I'd kind of outgrown it. And in my 40s, I began to have a distaste for nationalism as expressed on the cricket field. And So that's how the evolution went. But of course, as I explained in my book, I do support teams, not the Indian team, but the Karnataka Ranji Trophy team, or the Friends Union Cricket Club in Bangalore, of which I've been a member for more than 50 years. But I think it's partly a function of age, partly it's a function, Osman, of recognizing that sport is not the most important thing in life.
It's what the wonderful line was, that sport is the most important of the least important things in life.
That's a lovely line. I wish I would. Well, even there, I would say, yeah. I mean, the older I've grown, I mean, this is something, since Lahore is also a city of music, I think people appreciate. When I am a professional historian. I write works of social and political history for a living, and cricket only on the side. And cricket was an abiding passion for me outside my work. In my teens, my 20s, and my 30s. From my 40s, classical music overtook it. So when I visited Lahore many years ago, I asked my host to take me to Anarkali market because I wanted to find old cassettes of Roshnara Begum, and I got 3, which are on my iPod now. There were cassettes, now they're my iPod. So the great classical musicians of the subcontinent, whether Indian or Pakistani or Bangladeshi or 19th century or early 20th century or 21st century, are to me probably more important than cricket. It's a shameful confession for someone who's just written a cricket book. So cricket, I love cricket. I love the aesthetics of cricket, but I don't want to invest my emotional, psychological, ideological energy in cricket. So a good match, a good spell, a great innings, by anyone of any nationality, any age, that would do for the aesthete in me.
There's a couple of times. Once was in a recent interview with a colleague of mine at CricinFo, Nagraj Golapudi, who's talking about the book to you, in which you say to him that it's almost a relief writing a book on cricket from the rigors of historical research and books that are meticulously researched. And I think you mentioned in the book as well, there was a moment when you had come up against a bit of a block in what you were doing, and you took to writing on cricket to kind of relieve that block and move on. I wanted to ask about how that works for you, but also then how did you feel when you were writing a corner of a foreign field, because that is kind of combining cricket with with what you do.
So that's a very good question, Osman. So cricket writing was a release because when you write works of history, I'm not a novelist, so I can't make up anything. A novelist is at liberty to invent dialogue, invent characters, invent context, sketch in landscapes that don't exist, set a plot in a town that does not exist. But I have to be scrupulous about facts, which means I have to research and footnote every assertion.
Yeah.
So if my book is 500 pages long, the footnotes will cover up more than 100 pages. So cricket was a release, and it stayed that way, and I enjoyed it very much. I would write about, local characters, about context. If someone retired, I would write an appreciation. So I had a column on cricket which ran for about 7 or 8 years. And I thought that my profession and my passion will never mix, until quite by accident, I discovered that the first great Indian spin bowler, Palwankar Balu, was also a social reformer from the untouchable or Dalit community, and played a role in negotiations between Mahatma Gandhi and the great Dalit leader B.R. Ambedkar. And that was a complete revelation to me, by accident, that a cricketer was involved in negotiations. It's sort of like, the parallel would be that when Martin Luther King was discussing with Lyndon Johnson how to reform civil rights legislation, Jackie Robinson was in the same room, or a great African black basketballer was in the same room. That is so. I say, kya ho raha hai yahan pe? How did Balu become a negotiator in a political debate? In a political settlement between upper caste Hindus and lower caste Hindus. And that's when I realized that I went deeper. I looked at one story I'll tell about Balu. It's relevant to all lovers of cricket. A kind of epiphanic moment when I realized I had to write about Balu is I was looking at an old newspaper report on the quadrangular tournament of 1913. At that stage, I wanted to write a book on the quadrangular, which became the pentangular, which was a tournament in Mumbai from 1907 till 1945, which was the precursor to both the Ranji Trophy and the Qaidi Azam Trophy and whatever
Azam
the
Trophy,
trophy Bangladesh is. It was the great cricketing tournament of the subcontinent. And I want to write about the players who played there. Wazir Ali and Nazir Ali, Mushtaq Ali, the great Parsi cricketers, M.E. Pavri, C.K. Naidu, Vinu Makar, Alamalal. It was such a cricketing evocation. And then I came across this news report about the tournament in 1913 in the Bombay Chronicle. A batsman called M.D. Pai had just been chosen captain of the Hindu team. And he was felicitated by his caste, who are a Brahmin caste from the west coast of Karnataka, the state I currently live in. And the Gaud Saraswats who lived in Bombay gave him a felicitation. And at the felicitation, he said, I am grateful for this felicitation, but I should not be the captain since Mr. Balu is the better and more experienced player in the team. And I said,
Wow.
Kya ho raha hai?
Wow.
I mean, can you imagine? So when Sarfaraz was captain of Pakistan, saying Babar Azam should be captain instead of me, or Virat Kohli saying Rahane should be captain instead of me, or Imran Khan saying Javed Miandar should be captain instead of me. Impossible. No cricketer would go public by saying somebody else should be captain. And then I realized what he was saying. He was saying, I'm captain because I'm a Brahmin, and I have a certain cultural capital. Brahmins are supposed to be educated thinkers and kind of almost priest-like. And Balu, even though he's such a great cricketer, is not appointed a captain because he's a Dalit. It's like, the stereotype in many American football teams that a quarterback has to be white.
Yeah.
Or both strategic thinker has to be white. So that's when I started researching Balu's career. And I realized that the cricket field was not immune from the politics of caste, nor the politics of race, nor the politics of religion, nor indeed the politics of nationalism. So that book brought together my profession and my passion purely in an accidental way, but it was a one-off, and now I've returned to these two kind of segregated parts of my life.
So what was it? You and we were talking just earlier, and you mentioned it before. You think that, and no way is this the end of this conversation, but you think that this might be your last book on cricket, right? Is that I think that's fair to say that you why do you believe that, and do you not think that there may lay a subject out there which you would like to revisit and maybe visit and write upon?
So I'll tell you why. At this, there's no false modesty here. Whatever knowledge, expertise, and understanding of the game I have or had has been communicated in my 4 books on cricket. The first 2, Wickets in the East and Spin in Other Turns, are about cricket of the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah.
Not just pre-IPL, but of an age when the Ranji Trophy was more important than Test series.
Yeah.
When cricket was communicated through the radio. So you appreciate cricket by learning about the radio and occasionally going for a match. Then I wrote Column of Foreign Field that we've discussed. And the Commonwealth of Cricket is a memoir of my life with cricket. Now, this is the website you work for, Cricinfo, has wonderful writers. You are one of 8 or 9 brilliant writers of Cricinfo. And all of you are much younger than myself, which means you've grown to learn to appreciate, understand the game through television and through millions of replays. So your technical knowledge of the game is far greater than mine. Mine is a romantic, nostalgic, literary kind of evocation because I'm imagining kya ho raha hai, radio mein sun raha hu main. So I lack the technical capacity, the vocabulary, the understanding to write about cricket in the television, internet, hyper technology driven age. I'm also, I'm really a fan of Test cricket and 4-day cricket. So even the dynamics of 50-50 and T20, I don't understand. When I was followed cricket, there was no question of a batting coach, a bowling coach, statistical analysis, so I lack the tools and techniques to write about cricket today, which you guys have. I also, I am writing about something nobody has seen.
Yeah.
You have to write about, in an interesting way, about something people have already seen. And that task is much harder. It's much, much harder, believe me, Osman. It's not false modesty. If I'm writing about a match I saw in 1974, which nobody else has seen. The greatest, most important match was when Karnataka beat Bombay. None of my readers have seen the match or virtually none know what Vishwanath's stance was like or Prashant's off break was like. You are writing about something we guys have seen, and you are still have to make it interesting. So, what more for you, So, it is actually. So, I am a huge fan of the younger cricket writers of today because of the way in which they can make interesting and artful something I've already seen. I think I know. So I think that's really why I know that I can't write another book. Whatever I had to say, but I'll still watch it. I'll still debate about it. I may write the occasional column about it. But I know that whatever material I had in me has come out in good, bad, or indifferent form, and I can't, learn the tricks anew to write about cricket as it is played, organized, debated today.
But I feel, I feel like it's such a cricket is in such a, especially in India, it's in such a significant moment right now in the way, and your book, in fact, The Commonwealth of Cricket, one of the things it does trace is almost this arc of how the Indian cricketer has changed over the years, and how he is, now the Indian cricketer is a superstar, is an absolute superstar, and that's one of the things that comes through the book is that arc of when you were in the 60s and 70s, watching Indian cricket and Indian cricketers was a totally different experience to following them now. But I, at this moment in time, I feel like there's something that let's take Virat Kohli. Something about Kohli is, and this is a generalization of sorts, but it's kind of reflective of how India is right now. Constantly on the front foot, kind of in your face, kind of aggressive. I would think that a subject like that would be brilliant for you to kind of approach, a deeper look at what he says about India and what India says about Virat Kohli, for example. Oh, you're on mute, I think, Ram. I think you're on mute. Yeah, you're fine now. Yeah, you're fine now.
Yeah. So that's a great theme. How does Virat Kohli mirror the transformation in Indian society and politics and economics? And again, I'm a historian. I'm better at writing about the past. I also am much better at writing about society and politics than economics. A column of foreign field is the 4 parts of the book are called race. That is how cricket became a theater for a battle between the colonizing Europeans and the native Indians. Caste, the story of Palwankar Balu. Religion, Hindu-Muslim conflict has played out in the cricket field. And nation. Right. Now, there's a 5th category that is missing, which is market. And the last 20 years, market is as important, more important than caste and race, and as important as religion and nation, maybe even more important. Right. So I think as a social and political historian, not as an economic historian, that again is an area which I don't understand. I mean, I think there is a great book to be written. James Astle wrote quite a good book on this, but I think there needs to be a deeper and more thorough follow-up on that book. So, I'm glad, Osman, that I'm no longer writing about cricket, but watching and liking it. Because that frees me up to enjoy it even more. I don't have to document it. I don't have to impress people by how much I know about, Virat Kohli's batsmanship or, or Jimmy Anderson's art of swing bowling. I'm happy that I can just enjoy it.
So, just going back to this arc that I was talking about that is there in your book, one of your, I think, most scathing assessments in this book comes about how you stratify the 4 categories of superstars.
Yeah.
And you say, there's one category which is essentially crooked kind of superstars, people who have presumably, fixed or been corrupt for cricket. The others are those who are actively engaged in a conflict of interest in the various roles that they have taken on. And this is one thing is that this is not limited to Indian cricket. This is, essentially cricket everywhere pretty much. The third category is those who do think right, but are silent. And then the 4th category, of course, there's one man and one man alone. It's a category of one, which is Bishan Singh Bedi. Now, a lot of younger guys might think of somebody like Bishan Bedi and think of him as this cantankerous old man who has strong opinions on people like Murli and his action and stuff like that. But I think, they forget that he's a unique character in Indian cricket, right? And you of course have written of him fondly, and you followed his career as well. But just tell us a little bit about these categories that you have, and we're going to get into further discussion about those categories, but these categories that you kind of put these players in, and Bishan as well, Bishan Bedi as well.
So first of all, you're absolutely right that the compromised or timid or cowardly superstar in either sport or film is not unique to India. It would be found in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and indeed across the world. If you look at FIFA,
absolutely,
and the questions raised about two of the greatest footballers of modern times, Michel Platini and Franz Beckenbauer, right? So, however good you are with a ball or a bat or a racket, you may not be a moral or indeed courageous human being. Whatever courage, the courage you may have while facing Courtney Walsh and Malcolm Marshall, may not be there in everyday life. So that's kind of, so that sense, I'm glad you said that, because it's not as if Indian cricketers are unique in their life.
Not at all. Yeah, not at all.
Or Indian cricketers, because footballers may have it, tennis players may have it in different ways. I mean, I think among the reasons people like Federer is that, unlike some of the others, he isn't obviously a nasty and selfish and creepy and mean guy,
Absolutely.
So he's kind of the Bishan Bedi of tennis, you might say.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Bishan Bedi is I think Bishan Bedi is unique in his courage, in his principle, and it goes back to his playing days. In his playing days, there's a story he tells, which is a true story. And this is a story that's would stagger young people today who think of cricketers as multimillionaires. Back in the 60s, Indian cricketers were paid 50 rupees per day for a test match. 250 rupees for the whole day. There was a match in 67 or 68. We beat New Zealand in 4 days. So each cricketer got 200 rupees. Now, so can you imagine? That spurred him to campaign for better playing conditions. So he's the first Indian cricketer to say the board is making a lot of money on ticket sales, on advertisements. We need to be paid properly. Then in 1974, he gave an interview criticizing Indian selectors, for which he was dropped from the playing side. Then in 76, 77, he charged the Indian English cricketers with doing fishy things about Vasily, for which he lost his county contract in Northamptonshire, even though he was one of the greatest bowlers. So he's always stood up for his views, including on Murli. I don't agree with his views on Murli, but I see where he's coming from. He's a purist. So he's a person of, again, there's a story I tell in the book about he's happy to go to Afghanistan to coach. He said anywhere for cricket. Even the other cricketers would be going to Afghanistan because of the civil war and all that's going on. So he is a rather special kind of human being, and it's been a great privilege knowing him. On my phone, Osman, like on your phone, there are hundreds of numbers. There are two people whom I stand up instinctively. One is Bishan Bedi. The other is a great pioneering environmentalist who started the Chipko movement in the Himalaya. Okay. When I see their names on my phone, I stand up. I don't stand up for my wife's name or my mother's name, or even a big minister's name. I mean, some ministers, I don't stand up for them. Right. But Bishan Bedi and Chandi Prasad. So, it's been some of his fans now are doing I should reveal this secret. They're doing a volume for his 75th birthday.
Okay.
Across the world.
Okay.
Two people who played with him for Delhi, Venkat Sundaram, who was a left-handed opening batsman, and Kirti Azad, who played in the World Cup winning squad, are instrumental in this, and I've been helping them and advising them. And I think you'll find lots of interesting tributes to him, including by people he's criticized, because they know how special he is. I think there'll be, I don't think Murli will write or be asked to write, but some Indian cricketers whom he has written scathingly about have agreed to write. And I'm sure you'll find that despite the criticism they faced, their tributes will be full of manifestly sincere appreciation for his cricket and for his character.
It's remarkable. He's doing it to this day. Just the other day, I think a couple of weeks ago, he was pretty much the only kind of public voice calling for example, for Rahane to take over the Indian Test captaincy from Kohli. And he said, something that people have argued in the past, that, Kohli is not a great player, but maybe not the best captain. Although he seems to be a leader of men, and he's obviously got the wins record. But Rahane, I think, has shown himself to be a sharper, more astute captain, perhaps. Bedi came out and wrote a column on it, saying that Rahane should be captain, and nobody does that really.
It was a very well judged column.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very nuanced.
Very well argued.
He didn't rail or rant against Virat Kohli at all. He argued the fact that Rahane is a better captain, and it doesn't say badly of Kohli if somebody like Rahane replaces him. But
in fact, from history, Botham was a better player when he was not captain.
Yeah.
Sachin Tendulkar. And the closest example to Kohli would be Gary Sobers, who had that overpowering aura about him and could not. And when he played, he declined as a captain, but was not removed. Both against England in 67-68 and against Australia 68-69. He came back under Rohan Kanai, batted brilliantly, and West Indies won after many years in England. Right. So I think there are several examples of cricketers from elsewhere who are as great, as charismatic, as authoritative, and have turned out to be rather ordinary captains. And it's often taken the selectors a long time to notice this. Who knows if Kanai had been appointed captain 4 years earlier? So Sobers also lost to India at home. Maybe under Kanai or under Hunt, under a really good thinker, they may not have lost.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing about what I found interesting about the way you categorize 4 categories of superstars, and then you talk about Bishan Bedi, and I don't think there's been a cricketer like him, or certainly as outspoken and as straight. I wouldn't say outspoken, because that makes him sound like he rants. As straight spoken as him, as honest and straightforward as him. Even now, and occasion it becomes relevant in occasions like this. The farmer protests are happening or were happening recently. A lot of cricketers then came out on their social media accounts, and some of them kind of gave some anodyne statements of unity. Some of them were perhaps more kind of supportive of government stances. And the rumors, of course, that we were hearing were that they have been forced, they have been pushed, they have been coerced into doing it. But I think that era has kind of changed, despite the power that the Indian cricketer has. There's no players association body that has not come naturally from it. But the power that they have, I don't know. It feels in this time in India and Indian cricket, they're still I don't know. It felt a very limiting thing to know that these cricketers were being maybe pushed to tweet on an issue as important as this. This was clearly an issue that everyone was kind of completely engrossed in and taken by, and yet here you had these guys who were maybe being used as pawns in a wider game. It was, and I can't see somebody like Bedi ever falling for something like this, right?
And actually, he had a very satirical tweet about it. He said, till my fellow cricketers tweeted, I didn't realize there was anything going on at the teleporter. He had a very funny tweet about it. So he's got a great sense of humor also. And that's another really appealing thing about. He's got a sense of proportion, a sense of humor, including making jokes at his own expense. So he's a very, very unusual.
Yeah, he's always done that. Have you ever felt like, and I don't know whether you've thought about it deeply or not, but despite the kind of status that they acquire and they become icons and stuff, it's strange somehow, and this has happened in Pakistan as well, that the players have never been able to organize themselves into an association which looks after the interests of players, because ultimately they are the key to this whole thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Australia has done good things with their players association.
Yeah, England has done great things.
And to their credit, Bedi and Gavaskar did try to. Indian cricketers were paid much better after Bedi and Gavaskar fought for them in the 70s. And then, of course, Packer came along.
Yeah.
Packer scared the hell out of Indian cricket administrators, because the Pakistanis went, the West Indians went, some Englishmen went. And several Indian cricketers got offers. And that overnight, the fees went up from, I think, 1,000 rupees a test match to 10,000 rupees a test match. And then, of course, but for other things, like playing conditions, Ranji Trophy players, they're being paid. I don't necessarily expect cricketers to take a public stand whenever any injustice is going on. But they should at least keep their mouth shut and not take the government's point of view. That's what I would expect of them, not to become activists. If you want to fight, But I think that's something. It's sad. And Tendulkar has come out particularly in a very tragic way in this. And there was for those of you, anyone interested in the subject, there's a very fine essay in the Caravan magazine by a young writer called Vaibhav Vats on the subject of Tendulkar and his post-cricketing career and the kind of tragic odyssey of Tendulkar after he retired. So I would recommend that.
And that, I think, continued a kind of path even during his career when, he was there. He was not at all involved in the match fixing years, but, he led sides through it. And Pradeep Magazine's great book, Not Quite Cricket, kind of says that how could he have not known about this? And then if he had known about it, he never spoke about it. So I think that arc has always been there of Tendulkar, that he's kind of meek in speaking out about these things and more just interested in getting on with the game in a way.
So since you mentioned Pradeep Magazine, again, may I make a plug for a fellow writer? Pradeep Magazine has a very interesting book in press, which kind of complements mine. It's a memoir of his life with cricket, but as a cricket reporter, not mine is as a cricket fan. And of course, it's in a small town in Chandigarh in Punjab. And since he's from Chandigarh in Punjab, he saw Bishan Bedi at even closer quarters than I have. So his book, which will come out maybe next year, it's a brilliant autobiography of a brave, courageous, knowledgeable cricket writer from the 1980s till today.
Yeah, just, Pradeep, for people.
And invite him to the ThinkFest next year and he can chat with you.
Absolutely. For people who might not be familiar, although you really should if you're into cricket, but Pradeep Magazine was pretty much the first book on match fixing at the time. He was a reporter at the forefront of it, and I know other names came along and they got more attention, but I think Pradeep's book was definitive in how it was almost a ongoing reality show of a book, that it captured what was happening at the time. It came out like in the early 2000s, phenomenal book. And, always another one like Bedi, but in a very different way, very, very straightforward, speaks his mind, writes his mind, which is always important to see. We're talking kind of about this new age and money and the market you mentioned earlier. I think you've been unfairly maybe brandished sometimes by being a total anti-IPL critic. But I think it's fair to say that it's not something that interests you as a cricket watcher that much, right? The IPL.
I think it's not unfair. I am an anti-IPL kind of guy. So
okay. Okay. So unfair.
Whether what accompanies the characterization is fair or not, I can't say. But, I have a distaste for IPL. I'm a romantic for Test cricket. Although I live in Bangalore, although I have a free pass to the stadium to watch the local team play, I never go.
So just tell me, is the distaste, is it for the format itself, or is it for all the accompanying kind of glitter and stuff that comes?
Mostly the latter. I've talked in my book about how occasionally, sneakily, I watch a international T20 match. I don't mind that. But, I think, and though people have tried to, also the commentary is nauseating. I told Love, a friend of mine, Amit Verma, who's a very good blogger, podcast.
Ex-Cricinfo also.
Ex-Cricinfo also. Has been trying to persuade me that there's a new commentary channel called Dugout, which is more reflective and more intelligent, and that will get me there. He's also tried to persuade me that I should not look at IPL or T20 as a debased form of cricket, but as a different sport. Like racket sports. You can love tennis and badminton, and you can love Test cricket and IPL, or not IPL, T20. So I think there's some merit in what he's saying. I just love Test cricket, particularly when India is not playing, because you have no emotional investment, and the commentary is much better. So in my book, I talk about a series played in England in 2016. Pakistan versus England, much of which I watched on the telly, and I'm a partisan of bowlers over batsmen.
So that's the right way to be. That's the only way to be.
So, Jimmy Anderson versus Yasir Shah, I really enjoyed that series. So Test cricket is sublime, so that's really it.
I think I think Amit is right in the way that, and you don't, everyone doesn't get to it, but T20 is a different sport. The way it's played, the bowler's role is different. It's not reduced, I would say, but it's different. And it's the most fascinating thing about the sport actually is, cricket has always been a stats obsessed game, numbers obsessed game. But actually, this time in this format, I think you're getting a much deeper look into how batsmen operate, how bowlers operate, how fielders operate. And it's fascinating how much control, say, a coach has over what happens on the field. And so, if we have guys, Sid Monga at the site, and other writers, of course, from across sites who watch the game, and I keep saying that they watch T20 in a completely different way to even how I or you would watch the game. They understand it and they see it. It's almost like it's almost computer language code, that you see it in a different way, and so you appreciate it in a different way.
Also, what Amit persuaded me was, and you mentioned the coach, linked to this, that the captain has a much more important role in T20. Because, on a turning track, you would put Ashwin on for the whole day. And you're going to win the match. Okay, yeah. Right. Here, every over, every ball, depending on the batsman, if your punt is on strike, somebody will be a deep mid wicket. If somebody else on strike, somebody else will be a short cover. So that way, the thinking that goes to the game is probably also much more subtle and sophisticated and changing ball by ball.
It goes to your point about cricket being such a sophisticated game. I think it opens it up to a different level. And actually, the kind of rigor that goes into thinking and the analysis of T20, I think that is something that is healthy for cricket generally. I think it's something that should filter through into cricket thinking in ODIs and test matches as well. And I think it is kind of getting there. It will take some time. But ultimately, I think the razzmatazz and the glitter and the glamour and the money puts certain people off the entire format. I think not just the IPL, but the entire format. But anyway, I wanted to also talk about, of course, one of the things that I guess it surprised me, it surprised many people, and you'll know what I'm getting to, is when you became one of the men who was kind of one of the people, because Diana Edulji was there as well, but one of the people who became part of the committee of administrators in January 2017. January, and you were effectively in charge of kind of the operations of the game at that time for 4 months. You, of course, were there for 4 months. Tell me, knowing, and you weren't a cricket journalist, so you would have had a rough idea that the BCCI is not the best run body in the world, neither does it run the game especially well. Did you, how reluctant were you or not to take up that job offer? You write about it in the book, how it came to you, how it was offered to you by, I'm forgetting the name, but he was the amicus curiae during the Supreme Court hearings into this. Were you very reluctant to take this post on, or did you justify it to yourself that, okay, maybe I can make a change? I don't know what the thinking was.
It's a latter. It was an act of vanity. मैं कुछ कर सकता हूँ. One, and friend said, you live for the game, you love the game. This seems like a sincere attempt to clean it up. There was one friend who warned me. He said, don't join, because cricket is a private affair and the court should not be interfering. The court's job is to look into constitutional matters, rights of citizens, how institutions function. This is an overreach by the court which will go nowhere. So you are giving legitimacy to the court's interference in matters into which it should, however badly it's run, it's not the court's business. So it was in a sense.
Did that point of view ring out to you? Did it cause you think time?
I thought it made me pause, but there were many people telling me to join. And of course, what I saw was interesting, stark, revealing, surprising, depressing, and is captured in those chapters in the book. So in a sense, because it completed my journey from little boy loving the game in a small town to being inside the BCCI, in a sense, it was a natural arc with which to, kind of end the book. It would be interesting. Again, I don't know whether, again, since it's a Lahore, I'm speaking to an event hosted in Lahore. Whether Najam Sethi would write a book like this.
Well, Shahryar Khan has. Shahryar Khan has.
Shahryar Khan is different. I mean, Shahryar Khan was an establishment man. He was like a grande, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Like an outsider figure like me, And he had a much more important role than me because I think he was the sole guy. He was the sole guy, right? And I think he was appointed and dismissed. I don't know, but whether. So it would be interesting to see. So he had a much more important role. But as a person is sort of like me, an independent writer, journalist, editor, dragged into this. It's not as if he was a cricket journalist or Shahryar Khan is different. Shahryar Khan was
that's true. That's true. He's been part of the establishment for, of course, for all his life as a bureaucrat, as a diplomat or whatever. But I imagine it must have been a very eye-opening experience. And some of it comes through the book. You were there for 4 months, but it was actually a pretty tumultuous time because there was a threat that the team might pull out of the Champions Trophy because of ongoing disputes at the ICC between the BCCI and the ICC. The Kohli Kumble coaching captain bust up, I guess it was a bust up, happened around that time. You one of the things I found most interesting was that you came across this audit report that Deloitte, I think, had done of state associations, and I think you were shocked by what you saw in those reports. Just talk a little bit about the time also, but also generally, how much of an eye-opening experience was it? Because you were ultimately there for 4 months, I think, before you resigned.
So, I would rather approach it as a historian. I think in the history of cricket, which Test cricket, which starts in 1877, there have been three superpowers who've run the game. England ran the game for a whole century.
From
1877 till the onset of Packer. Australia ran the game from 77 to 2007, where Channel 9 controlled the rights. Australia would not tour in the winter. We had to go. India or Pakistan or West Indies had to be butchered by McGrath and Vaughan and Lee, and with the gloating of the Australian media. You remember all of that, right? And umpires too scared to, if Gilchrist appealed, it was out. That kind of stuff. And then from 2007, India became a superpower. So, there have been three superpowers in world cricket. All have dominated institutionally, financially, and they've acted like bullies, like big brothers and bullies. And early on, I told my colleagues, we should not be the way in which England and Australia was. If you look at, for example, the 87 World Cup, where the BCCI early on recognized that super powerdom is bad in politics and bad in cricket, they formed the Asian Cricket Council and tried to coordinate with Pakistan and Sri Lanka, and to push them. But then India decided we'll be the sole superpower. It's like sort of like after the Second World War, the USA was in alliance with the Europeans against the Russians. They said, dump the Europeans, we'll take them on. It's all ours. So, in a sense, that is what, as a historian, that was the larger worry. Rather than individual acts of corruption or nepotism or conflict of interest. So, super powerdom is bad in politics, economics, and sport. And I think that's what I wish Indians would recognize, more Indians would recognize, because all our life, as a country born out of an anti-colonial freedom struggle, in the 50s and 60s, we opposed superpower rivalries. We asked for smaller countries, poorer countries, less powerful countries to have greater rights in the UN and other places. That's our history, right? So, as a nation born out of anti-colonial struggle, we should become an imperialist in any sphere of life, just because we are a billion people with great cricketers and vast resources. So I think that's really the larger kind of, you could say, moral lesson that I was trying to convey to my colleagues. I failed, and that's in a sense why I wrote those chapters in my book. And the other, of course, more depressing conclusion was that Bishan Bedi was the one cricketer with a spine. I could have found more.
There's lovely bits in there. You talk very openly about guys like Rahul Dravid, and even Gavaskar to an extent, where you were very open with them about the conflict of interest that they had, various roles. Dravid was under 19 coach and head of the academy, but he was also involved with the IPL. And Gavaskar, of course, was head of the, I think, a player management agency, and yet he was a commentator as well. But it seems really heartening that these two gentlemen in particular, and I don't know if it will happen with newer cricketers now, but I think these two at least took on board, and Gavaskar, of course, then made sure you were invited to his brother-in-law's birthday bash and chatted to you as well, despite being unhappy with what you had written or what you had said. But I found it really heartening personally that you could have that kind of engagement with both of them, where it didn't turn into like a feud, and there was a bit of cooling off, but then essentially you acted like adults and talked about it and moved on. And I think that was still heartening to see somebody like Dravid, for example, who is there, who can take on board that kind of thing and move on and move past it.
Yeah. No, I mean, Dravid recognized much quicker than Gavaskar that I was right, and he appreciated it. Gavaskar took a long time, and I don't think he will now probably concede that I was right. But his humanity overtook him when his brother-in-law, G.R. Vishwanath, a fellow batting great, was celebrating his 70th birthday, and he knew how much I admired Vishwanath. Because, in my early books, which you referred to, I've written very lovingly about Vishwanath. I'm sure Vishwanath has not read those books, and I'm equally certain Gavaskar had. So he knew that Vishy would be happy to have me there, right? And I would be even happier. So it was a charming kind of reconciliation, which I was very pleased about.
Okay, I'm just going to move on. I'm going to take a couple of questions from that we've been sent in from people who are watching. The first one, I think we've kind of touched upon it, but it'd be nice to hear you more on it. Is what do you think about cricket rivalries when they move beyond simple support at matches? Do they bring the level of the game down? And obviously, he's referring to the kind of jingoism that has come into the game.
Yes, indeed, they do. The other thing I'd say is one of the few things to be said about the IPL is that it may have diluted nationalist rivalries. That when you see West Indians playing in your team, you may try and support them. The other thing I'd say about my book is as much about club cricket, college cricket, state cricket as international cricket. And I find that that's why it's in a sense called the Commonwealth of Cricket. That's not an allusion to the British Commonwealth. It's an allusion to cricket at all levels, all forms, from the mohalla to the great stadium, from the small town to the teeming metropolis, and so on. So, but yes, cricket is merely a sport. Don't let it influence the way you look at life, and recognize that however good, it's like, a great musician may be a complete asshole in his personal life. And in fact, often are. But appreciate their music and don't treat them as flawless otherwise. Don't take their word. Don't take Tendulkar's word on how to play Wasim Akram. He can show that better than anyone else in the world. But don't take Tendulkar's word on farmers' protest. He knows nothing about it at all. Right? So I think put cricket in its place, put cricketers in their place, and enjoy the game regardless of who wins or loses. Obviously you would like your side to win, but don't be utterly depressed if your side loses. And don't put sport in context, in proportion.
I think this is also, especially, I feel like it's a problem in the subcontinent for a lot of Indian and Pakistani fans. Sri Lankan fans are among generally the better, kind of more rational, more subdued fans in the subcontinent. Bangladeshi fans are also very, very much like Indian and Pakistani brethren. They take it completely to kind of to different places of it goes beyond support. It becomes jingoism and nastiness like that. But like you said, I think T20s and the IPL stuff like that. I think that kind of it's a sign that cricket maybe like football is moving away from kind of being an international game to being a more kind of intra-national. Domestic sides playing against each other in various leagues. It's probably not long before again we see like one league like a Champions League, which has the best T20 sides from around the world playing off in a league against each other. Which again, for thoughts on the format aside, it might not be a bad thing in kind of wrenching free a little bit cricket from the jingoistic impulses of the two biggest countries that kind of play the game. India and Pakistan both.
Absolutely, I totally agree.
There's another question. Saying, and I think the viewer says a lot of fans think cricket is becoming too bureaucratic. I think they make. What do you think? I think they mean maybe too politicized and too involved in the administration of the game, and a lot of the game is down to basically how the administrations run. And I think you have a unique vantage point in having been an administrator for 4 months.
I mean, now most people consume cricket through television, so which means there's a centralization of power in cricketing boards. Who gets allocated rights? Where matches are staged? For example, it's not at all an accident that India is playing England at the moment, and 2 matches are in Chennai and 2 matches in Ahmedabad, because the two most powerful people in Indian cricket belong to Chennai and Ahmedabad respectively. All right. So, which should not be the case. So, and they know that as long as it's telecast well, everywhere they'll see it.
Yeah.
So, when a sport becomes a massive commodity, and there are all kinds of, centralization of power and the possibility of abusing that power arises. So, like the IPL, I mean, I've argued that why are the teams franchises concentrated in the richest cities? The Northeast has no team. UP and Bihar and Orissa and Madhya Pradesh in sort of the Indian heartland, 400 million people, no team. So I think distortions arise when something becomes so big.
Yeah, and I think money is something that has helped the game. It's developed the game. I think you see the game now, and it's at a level purely even Test cricket, the athleticism of the players and how good they are as sportsmen. I think it's at a level that has never been seen in the game before. And that's down to the kind of money that's been invested in it, which comes from the market essentially. But I guess the point there is that it's becoming more and more clear that cricket will essentially become a game that is being played by the countries that have the money to invest in it, and the other countries will kind of feed off that basically, which leads to a very unequal system.
The other thing I'd say about the proportion, in some ways I'm sad that Indians and Pakistanis are so obsessed with cricket because the other sports suffer.
Yeah.
Pakistan had a great hockey tradition, a great squash tradition.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's gone. I mean, Indians still have some of the world's greatest billiards players, chess players, but no one knows about them. And those are international sports. Cricket is not an international sport. It's played by 10 countries.
Yeah.
Hockey, squash, chess, billiards are international sports. Bridge. Again, one of my great heroes, by the way, this may be news to you, Osman, is the Pakistani bridge player Zia Mahmood.
Ah, okay. That is
I used to play bridge. I read about bridge. Okay. I used to play serious bridge. I was once in a tournament with him in Delhi when he was on table 1 and I was on table 98 out of 100. No, that's okay. But how many people in Pakistan know about the great sporting achievement of Zia Mahmood compared to the last 5-wicket haul one of your so many young fast bowlers
took. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I think that's something. When Sachin Tendulkar, there was a debate as to whether he should get our highest national award, the Bharat Ratna. I said, Suresh Menon, who's a very good sports writer, wrote something which I read. Either sports people should not get it, or if he gets it, he should get it with Vishy Anand, who's world chess champion, which is a much more competitive game, right? But of course, so I think Indians and Pakistanis must place their love of cricket in context, not only with regard to life in general, but also other sports, at which we are seriously neglecting in our kind of imaginative space.
Lovely. I think that is just about all the time we have left. Thank you very much, Ram, for your time. Just to on a leaving note, will you confirm that you will at least write on cricket occasionally, if not in the form of a book, then at least in some columns here and there, so we can at least read some rational.
I will, and I may do something which is rather, I don't know what miserly authors do, is at some stage I might collect all my uncollected cricket writings and try and do a best to my cricket journalism. Maybe. And I'll certainly watch the game and I'll write the occasional column. And thank you, Osman. Thank you
very much, Ram, for joining us. Thank you very much for people who sent in questions and who were there. And that's pretty much it from us. Do get the book, highly recommended, Commonwealth of Cricket by Ram Guha, out, I think published by HarperCollins. Is that correct? Yeah. And it's out, and it's and do get his other books, both cricket and non-cricket. I would especially recommend non-cricket books. India After Gandhi, great history of a fascinating country. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone, and take care.